They had traveled the stars for 50,000 years. They had mapped galaxies that humans would never see. They had built ships that could cross the darkness between stars in days instead of centuries. Their scientists had learned to break apart atoms and put them back together in new ways. Their weapons could destroy entire planets with a single blast. They thought they knew everything important about the universe. They were wrong. It started with a small research station at the edge of explored space. The station had one job. It listened for energy signals from unknown worlds. Most days it heard nothing interesting. Sometimes it caught the hum of a young civilization learning to use electricity. Sometimes it detected the pulse of a dying star. The scientists who worked there were used to quiet, boring shifts. Then one morning, the machines went crazy. Every alarm in the station started screaming at once. Red lights flashed on every screen. The scientists ran to their posts, thinking something had broken, but nothing was broken. The machines were working perfectly. They were just detecting something impossible. The energy reading came from a small yellow star in an ordinary corner of the galaxy. They had noticed this star before but never paid much attention to it. The planets around it seemed unremarkable. The third planet had life, yes, but the life there was young and primitive. They had only recently learned to fly. They had not even left their own world yet. But the energy signal coming from that third planet was stronger than anything they had ever recorded. It was stronger than their antimatter bombs. It was stronger than the engines that powered their fastest ships. It was so strong that at first, the scientists thought there must be a mistake. Senior scientist N stared at the numbers on his screen and felt something he had not felt in 300 years of work. He felt afraid. He sent a message to the High Council. The Council took the message seriously. They sent their best diplomat to investigate. Her name was Ambassador N, and she had spoken with hundreds of alien species during her long career. She thought she was ready for anything. She was not ready for Earth. N traveled to the third planet in a small, hidden ship. They had strict rules about contacting primitive species. They were supposed to watch from far away and never interfere. But this energy signal was too dangerous to ignore. N needed to find its source. She landed her ship in a field outside a large human city. The city was called New York. It was full of tall buildings made of glass and metal. Millions of humans lived there, packed together in tiny spaces. N found this strange. Her own people valued space and silence. Why would anyone choose to live so close to others? She used her scanning equipment to track the energy signal. It led her through busy streets where humans rushed past each other without making eye contact. It led her past shops and restaurants where humans sat alone, staring at small glowing screens. It led her up a tall building and down a narrow hallway. The signal ended at a door marked with the number 714. N hesitated. The energy reading from behind this door was enormous. She had expected to find a machine or a weapon. Instead, her instruments told her there was only one human inside, a single, ordinary human. She knocked. The door opened slowly. A woman stood there. She was small and thin, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was messy. She wore old clothes that looked like she had been wearing them for days. She looked at N with tired, empty eyes. Then those eyes went wide. N was tall, almost 7 feet. Her body was made of something that looked like living crystal, pale blue and faintly glowing. She had 4 arms and a face that was almost human but not quite. She understood why the woman was staring. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman let out a small laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when something is so strange that crying would make more sense. The woman's name was Myra. She was 34 years old. She worked from home as a translator, turning documents from one language into another. She lived alone. She had lived alone for 3 years, ever since her mother died and her last relationship ended in the same terrible month. She had not spoken to another person in 11 days. N used her translation device to speak in Myra's language. She asked if she could come inside. Myra nodded slowly, still too shocked to be scared. She stepped back and let the alien enter her small apartment. The apartment was not dirty, but it was not clean either. Dishes sat in the sink. Blankets lay tangled on the couch. A cold cup of tea rested on the coffee table, forgotten. The blinds were closed. The only light came from a laptop on the kitchen counter, its screen dark. N looked around and then looked at Myra. Her scanning equipment was still running. The energy signal was definitely coming from this woman, from inside her chest where humans kept their hearts. But there was no machine there, no weapon, nothing that should produce such power. N did not understand. She asked Myra what she was hiding. Myra said she was not hiding anything. N asked what weapon she possessed. Myra said she owned no weapons. N asked what device was creating the energy signal. Myra just stared at her. N pointed at Myra's chest. She explained about the signal, about how it was stronger than antimatter bombs, about how it had brought her across the galaxy. She asked again, what was the source of this power? Myra sat down heavily on her couch. She looked at her hands for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and rough. She said there was no device, no weapon, no machine. She said the alien was detecting something that could not be measured in the normal way. She said it was just loneliness. N did not understand the word at first. Her translation device struggled with it. They had no exact equivalent. They lived for thousands of years and spent much of that time alone, but they did not feel what humans felt. They were complete inside themselves. They did not need others in the same desperate, painful way. Myra tried to explain. She talked about waking up in the middle of the night and reaching for someone who was not there. She talked about eating dinner alone and having no one to tell about her day. She talked about walking through crowds of people and feeling invisible. She talked about the weight in her chest that never went away, the ache that had no cure, the hunger that food could not fill. She talked about being surrounded by 8 million people and feeling like she was the last person in the universe. N listened carefully. She ran more scans. The energy readings spiked when Myra talked about her mother dying. They spiked again when Myra admitted she had not touched another human in months. They spiked when Myra laughed that same hollow laugh and said that nobody would notice if she disappeared tomorrow. The ambassador began to understand. This was not a weapon that humans had built. This was something they carried inside them, something they did not even know was there. She asked Myra if other humans felt this way. Myra laughed again, that sad and broken sound. She said of course they did. She said everyone felt this way sometimes. She said the whole world was full of lonely people pretending not to be lonely. N felt a chill run through her crystal form. She thought about the readings, about the numbers that had terrified her scientists. She thought about what would happen if this energy could be gathered and focused. She thought about millions of humans, billions of them, each carrying this terrible power inside their chests. She asked Myra one more question before she left. She asked why humans did not talk about this, why they did not help each other, why they let themselves suffer alone when they could suffer together. Myra's eyes filled with tears. She said that was a good question. She said she wished she knew the answer. N returned to her ship and sat in silence for a long time. Then she began writing her report to the High Council. Her hands were shaking as she typed. She had discovered something that changed everything the thought they knew about the universe. Humans were not a primitive species with simple technology. They were a species carrying weapons more powerful than anything they had ever built, and they did not even know it. The ambassador finished her report and sent it to the stars. Then she looked back at the glowing city below, at the millions of small lights in the darkness, each one a person who might be feeling the same thing Myra felt. She wondered if they could survive what was coming. The High Council met in their great chamber, a room carved from the heart of a mountain on their home world. The walls were ancient stone, polished by thousands of years of careful hands. Light filtered down from crystals in the ceiling, casting everything in soft blue and white. It was a room designed for calm discussion and careful decisions. There was no calm today. The council members had all read Ambassador N's report. They had seen the energy readings. They had watched the recordings of the human woman named Myra, speaking quietly about her pain while invisible power radiated from her chest. Some of the council members were old enough to remember the last Great War, when antimatter bombs had destroyed 3 inhabited worlds. The readings from Earth were higher than those bombs, much higher. General R spoke first. He was the oldest member of the council, a warrior who had seen too much violence to fear it anymore, but even he looked troubled. He said they needed to contain the threat. Humans could not be allowed to discover what they possessed. If they ever learned to focus this energy, to use it as a weapon, no fleet could stop them. He recommended placing a blockade around their solar system, keep them trapped on their world until the council could decide what to do. Other members of the council agreed. The humans were dangerous. They had to be controlled. But N shook her head. She said containment would not work. Humans were clever and curious. They would eventually notice the blockade. They would ask questions. They would push against the walls they built around them. And if they ever felt trapped, if they ever felt truly alone in the universe, the energy inside them would only grow stronger. She said she had studied humans during her time on Earth. She had watched them carefully. She had learned things about them that the council needed to understand. The council listened. N explained that humans were not like her own people were born complete. They did not need others to feel whole. They enjoyed company sometimes, but they could live alone for centuries without suffering. Humans were different. They were built for connection. Their minds and bodies needed other humans the way they needed food and water. When humans were together, really together, they were creative and brave and kind. They built beautiful things. They helped strangers. They risked their lives for people they had never met. Their connection made them strong. But when that connection was broken, something terrible happened inside them. The need did not go away. It turned into pain. It turned into a hunger that grew larger and larger until it consumed everything. That was the energy they had detected. It was not a weapon humans had built. It was the darkness left behind when light was taken away. The council considered this. One member asked why humans did not simply fix the problem. If they needed connection so badly, why did they not stay connected? N said that was the saddest part. Humans had built a world that made connection harder and harder. They had created machines that let them talk to anyone, but made them feel more alone than ever. They had built cities where millions lived side by side but never learned each other's names. They had invented rules that made it shameful to admit weakness, to ask for help, to say the simple words, "I am lonely." She showed the council more recordings. Humans eating meals alone in their small rooms. Humans scrolling through images of other people's happy lives while feeling worse about their own. Humans lying awake at night, wanting to reach out but afraid of what others might think. Humans dying with no one beside them because they had been too proud or too scared to ask for company. The energy readings in each recording were enormous, not as high as Myra's but still powerful, still dangerous, and there were billions of humans on that small planet. The combined power of their loneliness was beyond calculation. General R repeated his recommendation. If containment would not work, perhaps something more permanent was needed. He did not say the word destruction, but everyone understood what he meant. N stood and faced him directly. She said that destroying Earth would release all that stored energy at once. The explosion would be visible from galaxies away. It might tear a hole in the fabric of space itself, and even if it did not, it would not solve the problem. Humans were already spreading. They had sent machines to other planets. They dreamed of traveling to the stars. Within a few hundred years, they would leave their world. They could not kill them all without destroying themselves in the process. The council fell silent. They had weapons that could crack planets. They had ships that could cross galaxies, but they did not have a solution for this. N let the silence stretch. Then she spoke again, more quietly this time. She said there might be another way, a harder way, a way that would require them to do something they had never done before. The council asked what she meant. She said that could help the humans heal, not with weapons or technology, but with knowledge, with truth. Humans did not know what they carried inside them. They thought their loneliness was weakness. They thought their pain was something to be ashamed of. They hid it from each other, and that hiding made it worse. But what if they knew? What if someone showed them the truth? What if they learned that their loneliness was not weakness but power? That the ache in their chests was not a personal failure but a force of nature? That they had been carrying something enormous and they did not have to carry it alone? N said she had seen something in the human records. Long ago, humans had understood connection better. They had built communities that cared for each one of their members. They had created rituals that brought strangers together and made them family. They had known how to hold each other through pain. Humans had forgotten these things, but they could remember. They could learn again. General R shook his head. He said they had rules about interfering with primitive species. He said showing humans this truth could change their development in unpredictable ways. N agreed. She said it was a risk. She said everything about this situation was a risk, but she believed it was the only choice that did not end in disaster. The council debated for 3 full cycles of their sun. They argued and analyzed and ran simulations. In the end, they voted by a narrow margin to follow N's plan. They would show humanity the truth. They would reveal what loneliness really was, and they would hope that humans chose to heal themselves instead of destroying everything. N returned to Earth to begin the work. She did not know if the plan would succeed. She did not know if humans would listen. But she remembered Myra's face, the tears on her cheeks, the hunger in her eyes when she talked about being seen. She remembered how the energy readings had dropped just a little when N had sat with her and listened. Humans wanted to connect. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. The ambassador hoped that would be enough. The message appeared everywhere at once. Every television screen on Earth, every computer monitor, every phone, every digital billboard in every city. One moment humans were living their ordinary lives, and the next moment they were all looking at the same impossible thing. A face made of pale blue crystal, 4 arms folded peacefully, a voice that spoke every language at the same time, each person hearing their own words. The alien said her name was N. She said she came from a civilization that had traveled the stars for 50,000 years. She said her people had been watching Earth, and she said she had something to tell them. Across the world, humans stopped what they were doing. They stood in the streets staring at screens. They gathered in living rooms. They pulled their cars to the side of roads. For a few minutes, the entire planet held its breath. N told them the truth. She explained that her people had detected an energy signal coming from Earth, a signal stronger than any weapon they had ever built, a signal so powerful that it had terrified the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. She said the signal was coming from them, from humans, from the emptiness they carried inside their chests. She showed them the readings. She showed them the numbers. She explained what loneliness really was, not a weakness, not a failure, not something to be ashamed of. It was power, raw, enormous, terrifying power. The ache of wanting connection, the pain of being alone, the hunger for someone to see and know and hold them. These feelings had weight. They had force. They could shake the foundations of reality itself. The alien paused. Her crystal face softened. She said she had met a woman named Myra. She said Myra had been alone in a small apartment, carrying more energy inside her than the strongest bombs ever built. And Myra had not known. She had thought she was weak. She had thought her pain was something wrong with her. Myra was not wrong, the alien said. Myra was not weak. Myra was powerful beyond measure, and so was every human who had ever felt alone. The message continued for 30 minutes. N showed recordings of lonely humans from all over the world. She showed the energy readings above each one. She showed how the power grew when people pulled away from each other and shrank when they reached out. She told humans that they had a choice. They could keep doing what they had been doing. They could keep pretending that loneliness was shameful. They could keep building walls between each other and staring at screens instead of faces. And if they did, the energy would keep growing until something broke. Or they could choose something different. The alien finished her message with a simple request. She asked humans to look at each other. Really look. She asked them to speak the words they had been too afraid to speak. She asked them to reach out and touch someone. Then the screens went dark. In Myra's apartment, the woman sat frozen on her couch. She had watched the whole message without blinking. She had seen her own face on the screen, her own pain described for the entire world to hear. She had learned that her loneliness was not weakness. For a long time she did not move. Then slowly she picked up her phone. Her sister answered on the second ring. She said she had seen the message too. She asked if Myra was okay. Myra started to say she was fine. She had said those words 1,000 times before, but this time they stuck in her throat. She told the truth instead. She said she was not okay. She said she had been not okay for a long time. She said she was lonely and tired and scared and she did not know how to fix it. Her sister was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Myra would remember for the rest of her life. She said, "Me too." They talked for hours. They cried together through the phone. They made plans to see each other the next day in person for the first time in almost a year. When Myra finally hung up, something inside her chest felt different, lighter, less heavy. She was not alone anymore. Across the world, the same thing was happening everywhere. Neighbors who had lived next door for years finally knocked on each other's doors. Old friends who had lost touch sent messages saying, "I miss you." Strangers on the street made eye contact and smiled. Parents called their children. Children called their parents. People who had not touched another person in months reached out and held hands. Not everyone changed. Some people saw the message and got angry. They said it was a trick, an invasion, a lie. They said aliens were the enemy. They said humans should fight back. They tried to build more walls, stronger walls, higher walls. But they were outnumbered. Ambassador N watched from her ship in orbit. Her instruments tracked the energy readings across the planet. At first, nothing seemed to change. The loneliness was still there, enormous and heavy, pressing down on billions of people. Then the numbers started dropping. It was slow at first. A small decrease here, a tiny shift there, but it was real. Humans were reaching for each other, and when they connected, the terrible power inside them began to fade, not disappear. The need for connection would never disappear, but the pain of not having it grew less and less. General R contacted her from the home world. He asked if the plan was working. N said she thought so. She said it was too early to be sure. She said humans were unpredictable and the change might not last, but she had hope. The general grunted. He said he still thought containment would have been simpler. N looked at the blue-green planet below. She watched the lights of cities where millions of people were finally talking to each other. She thought about Myra, speaking to her sister for the first time in too long. She told the general that simple was not always better. She said some problems could only be solved the hard way. The general did not argue. Weeks passed, then months. The energy readings continued to fall. Humans built new things, support groups, community centers, public spaces designed for gathering. They changed their laws to give people more time with their families. They taught children in schools about the importance of connection. They created technology that brought people together instead of pushing them apart. They were not perfect, they never would be. Humans still hurt each other, they still made mistakes, they still felt lonely sometimes, even surrounded by love. But they had learned something important. They had learned that their pain was not weakness. They had learned that reaching out was not shameful. They had learned that they were all carrying the same heavy weight, and they could help each other carry it. They continued to watch from afar. They had other species to study, other worlds to explore, other problems to solve. But they never forgot what they had learned from the small blue planet near an ordinary yellow star. Humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons or their anger or their violence. They were dangerous because they loved so much that the absence of love could tear holes in the universe. And they were beautiful, not despite their need for each other, but because of it. Their loneliness was power, yes, but so was their connection. When humans came together, when they held each other through the dark, they created something they had never seen before. They created hope. Ambassador N made one final visit to Earth before she returned home. She went to a small apartment in a tall building in a city of 8 million people. She knocked on a door marked with the number 714. Myra opened the door with a smile. She looked different now. Her eyes were brighter, her hair was combed. She wore clean clothes and stood. Behind her, N could hear laughter, other voices. Friends or maybe family gathered in the small space. The energy readings from Myra's chest were almost normal now. Still there because the need for connection never went away, but no longer painful, no longer destructive, just human. Myra invited the ambassador inside. She introduced her to her sister, her neighbors, who had become a close friend. They ate food together and talked about small things, weather, books, favorite memories. They laughed a lot. N stayed for several hours. When she finally left, she paused at the door and looked back at Myra. She said she was proud of them, all of them, the whole species. Myra smiled again. She said they still had a long way to go. N nodded. She said that was true, but they were going together. And that, she said, made all the difference. The ambassador returned to her ship and flew away from Earth, back to the stars where she belonged. She carried with her a memory she would never forget. A small room full of people, holding each other through the darkness, turning their pain into something better. Humans were a remarkable species. They had contained enough power to destroy galaxies, and they had chosen instead to heal. And hoped they would keep choosing. She believed they would. The stars were brighter now than they had ever been before.